Hello friends! I am so excited to be here on this beautiful June morning with my beautiful kindred spirit friend Diane Churchill. And I think if you're watching this video, you're going to be wishing that you were right here with Diane, because she is so warm and wonderful and wise and real. And I've learned so much from you and am honored to call her my friend. Thanks for doing this.
Well, thank you, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. And right back at you, sister.
So we are here, as you can see, in an extraordinary place. This is a labyrinth, and you're going to get to see more of it later in this video. And when Diane told me that she was going to build a labyrinth here at her lovely farm, I needed her to share, because I don't know about you, but I really didn't know anything about a labyrinth or what it's for or why you would build one. And so that's the treat that we get today, is that Diane is going to share her story with us, her amazing story of this labyrinth and what inspired her to have it built. But before we get into that, I want to tell you that the essay I wrote for this month, called Walking Backwards, was inspired by my own profound walk through this very labyrinth, through Diane's labyrinth. And my time that I had with God here in this place really opened up a whole corner of my world and really set me on a new trajectory. And so I think if you read Walking Backwards, and especially if you read it after seeing this video, you are going to understand why this is such a special place. So let's launch in. You ready?
Ready?
Okay, so what on earth possessed you to create a labyrinth in this marvelous place? Tell us about that.
Great. Yes. So a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to participate in the Intimacy Project, which was offered by a local retreat center, Kavana House in York, PA, about half an hour north of here. And the Intimacy Project offered an opportunity to explore contemplative practices, ways to connect with God in a more receptive posture. I know for myself, I'm often talking at God, talking to God, asking for things, even thanking Him, but I'm doing the talking. And the Intimacy Project introduced me to ways to listen better. So we learned practices such as breath prayer, holding prayer, and one of the practices we learned about is Labyrinth. So Labyrinth is actually a very, very old practice that was based in the tradition of making pilgrimages to holy places. It was actually a substitute for making the pilgrimage. So if somebody could not actually make the pilgrimage, they built labyrinths, and it was symbolic of their journey to the holy place. So it's a very old practice that has been sort of unearthed and brought back into use. And I found it to be just a beautiful practice. I was very curious, but also had learned a little bit about the practice not through a walking labyrinth, but I have a finger labyrinth. And I actually, in the Intimacy Project, we actually learned, sure, we actually learned using a paper labyrinth, and then I was able to purchase this wood labyrinth made of alder wood. And the idea with a finger labyrinth is just using your non-dominant finger, that you walk the path with your finger. And I'll talk a little bit more about how to walk the labyrinth, or just, there are many, many ways to walk the labyrinth, but I like to provide people with some launch points or prompts, because it can be a little intimidating when people just really don't know where to start. I find that as people, and you may have found this, Kim, that after you've walked the labyrinth a time or two, you start to explore different ways or different intentions that you might set for your practice in the
Yeah.
labyrinth at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. So, how does one set about building a labyrinth? I mean, I'm like, I feel victory if I throw some tomatoes in my garden, but I would never think about doing something like this. So tell us about this project.
Well, first I have to assert that a disclaimer that I did not build this labyrinth. I had the idea for
Quite handy, Diane.
I had the idea. Well, labyrinth just really spoke to my heart, and so I was using the finger labyrinth on a regular basis, and found that my spirit and my mind opened in a way that. And became more receptive in a way that it didn't, even with the other contemplative prayer practices. So it was really a dear practice. And I had a birthday coming up. This was last year in 2019. And so I had the great idea to ask for a labyrinth for my birthday. So I asked my husband, Dave, and my 4 children to gather rocks from the woods on our farm. And I had a little clearing and they could build a labyrinth. Well, my very wise husband realized that not only was that not a little project, but that he would end up doing most of the work. So he enlisted the help of our friends and who are landscapers, Mary Pat Neff and Mark Sullivan of Fieldstone Nursery right down the road. So they have already transformed the gardens around our house. So we love working with them, and they've become dear friends. And Dave called them, and so presented me for my birthday a date with Mary Pat and Mark. And little did I know, they had already built a labyrinth. They had experience building a labyrinth, yes. And we actually I went with them to visit the labyrinth as this was under construction. It was quite different from this one, but they knew what a labyrinth was about. And so we sat down and we had sort of just a conversation of what our vision was and what really where my heart was. And we went from there. So we sort of came up with some measurements. Interestingly, Mark and Mary Pat are artists by training. They are sculpture graduates of Maryland Institute, and in their landscaping business, they use those skills so beautifully. So Mark knew a lot about the building and the hardscape, and then Mary Pat did the landscaping. But initially, it was going to be just the hardscape, it was going to be just the labyrinth. I really wanted it to be simple, and we would deal with the landscaping in future years.
Okay.
But God had a different plan. So Mark started digging in about May of 2019, and he discovered that most of the land here was rock. It was clay, a little bit of clay and a whole lot of rock. So we had to call in the big guns, some big machinery that in order to level the land, unearthed all of the rocks that you see around the perimeter of the labyrinth.
Oh my gosh.
They estimate it was about 20 pallet of fieldstone. So they pulled them out, and then eventually Mark used that to create the outer wall. And also this bench that we're sitting on and the other benches. And around that time, Dave and I took a trip to Scotland, and we saw a lot of the standing stones that were ubiquitous around Scotland. And we loved that idea, and Mark said, "Oh, I can do that." And so he used his bobcat and he set the standing stones and made sculpture out of the labyrinth. And then he created the path using a pin in the very center of the labyrinth and a string, and that was how he created the path. And so, because it was all dug up, it was literally unearthed, we thought we might as well do the landscaping. And so I'm so happy that we did. It creates a beautiful environment.
It is just, it's so tranquil, and I know everything about it is intentional. And I know you, and I know you love to create sacred spaces, really special spaces in your home. And this is definitely a sacred space, but it's much more than that, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yes, I do love to create sacred spaces, and this is truly a special one. It's really special even in all 4 seasons. So we've come out. I've come out and walked it in the snow with the leaves blowing. So
wow.
it is really a special. It has really become a special place, even year round. I really do have to remind myself that yes, every stone was directed by God, and that is very intentional. But that, and every tree, every shrub, but that this is not just a pretty garden. That this really is a tool. This really is a connection, a tool to connect to God in a way that I don't find in other practices. So I have really found that in walking the labyrinth, and I think you may have found this too, that there's a harmony of mind, body, and spirit. As the physical act of walking helps me to release distraction and sort of all of the details of my day and my task list, and really be present in the moment with God. I have actually a reading, just some words from
yes.
Adele Calhoun. This is Spiritual Disciplines Handbook, which I absolutely love. And in here, the other book that's really has been really helpful to me is Walking a Sacred Path by Lauren Artris. But from Adele Calhoun's
Then that has
words.
that has that right on there. The labyrinth
Yes.
right on there. That's pretty cool.
Yes. And so that was, I read that whole book, and you can see it's very well tabbed. So Adele Calhoun says, in walking the labyrinth, you leave behind the noise and hurry of life. Just as you would pack simply for a pilgrimage, you offer your load to Jesus as you begin your prayer journey. The prayer path structure moves you slowly toward the center and toward God. At times you are close to the center. Further along the path, you may be farther from the center. This represents the reality of the spiritual journey. But as we keep moving, we are always getting closer to the center and to God, no matter how far away it looks in real space. At the center of the walk, you can stop and rest in the presence of God, listening for His word to you. With His word in your heart, you can begin your journey back to the world.
Oh, I love that.
And that's actually how I walk the labyrinth, which
Yeah, well, tell us about that, because what does it look like? How does it work? Actually coming here and walking it. Tell us about the stages of that.
Sure. So I think of I approach the labyrinth really in 4 stages, and I don't always think of those. I don't think, oh, I'm moving to the next stage, but in my as I'm thinking about walking the labyrinth, I think of moving through these 4 stages. The first being preparation. At the start, I pause for a minute or two at the beginning of the labyrinth, and I quiet my mind and spirit. I take a moment to thank God for this time and space. I remind myself of my identity in Christ.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
And sometimes I set an intention or question for the time in the labyrinth. I might use a prayer word or phrase or a mantra. Some use the word Maranatha, which in Aramaic, Jesus' first language, means "Come, Lord." Sometimes people will just follow their breath prayer, and it can help to remove distractions. So then as I begin walking, that is sort of the purging, the purgation step, which is really a releasing, a surrendering or yielding to God. Sometimes I can actually envision dropping things off of my shoulders, and I really try to focus on the next step. Again, not seeing how close I am to the center or how long I've been in. I try to forget about time for a few moments. And I notice any thoughts or feelings that may have been distracting me or causing me to question or to worry, and I let them go. And I even tell myself, just let it go for a moment. This is time in the labyrinth. This is your time. And so there's sort of a conversation going on. Then as I get to the center,
Which is where we are right now.
right, which is this beautiful stone bench, that is a time. It's actually called the illumination stage, which Lauren Artress covers in her book Walking the Sacred Path. So in that stage, or that part of the journey, I often, and it is common practice to open my heart to a receptive posture with the Lord. And I consider what He might be revealing to me. Sometimes people will pray or even dance. Sometimes what I do, this bench seems to be perfectly fitted to my body, and I lie on the bench and I look up, and there are trees and the sun and the clouds, and sometimes I just watch the birds, and that's a really a beautiful freeing time, and I'm free from my own thoughts, and I feel that that's a time when I'm more open to what God may be revealing to me. And then there's really no time limit on that center, that time in the center, although I feel life sometimes beckoning me. So then as I journey from the center back through to the outer path, or from the labyrinth, it's the same path. The interesting thing about a labyrinth is it's unlike a maze. There's one road in and one road out.
Okay.
So I walk out, and that's more of an integration. Depending on what I felt the Holy Spirit speaking to me, I reflect on what He might be inviting me to. Sometimes I feel like God speaks to me so clearly here that I will take some notes in my journal.
Wow, huh? Big wow. You know, what I love about this, Diane, is that there's so many ways, countless ways beyond what we know, that God desires for us to connect with Him and has provided for us to connect with Him. And you have really kind of taken just who you are and this gorgeous place that you've been blessed with, and you have been inspired and been brave to really follow through on a dream of just taking all of that and expressing it through this labyrinth, which is such a unique and powerful way to connect with God. I know life-changing for me to connect with God here. And it's really a great act of love. It's really a beautiful act of love. And I think that there's so many ways that I've been impacted here, and that many people can be impacted. And there are ways that each of us connect with God that are different and beautiful. And there is something for each one of us to express and to learn and to grow in the ways that we interact with God. So this was so awesome. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
doing this.
Thank you.
I love you, friend.